Look at John Wall. Go get it. I love that.
Oh, that's a great block right there.
That's the most, like, satisfying play in basketball. Just pinning someone right up against the backboard.
I was so glad to see somebody block that shot because I didn't want to see any more dunks.
While everyone's busy touting the Warriors and the Celtics and the Cavs, the Houston Rockets are quietly boasting the best record in the NBA, or in other words, they're really good. They beat the Hornets 108-96 last night. Chris Paul chipped in 31 points and 11 assists, and they've won 11 straight since CP3 returned from injury. Nick, why do you think it is the Rockets don't get more love as potential contenders in the NBA?
Well, we have been conditioned over the last few years, and understandably so, to believe two teams can win the title. The team LeBron plays for or the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
Like that's, and there have been reason for that.
Yeah, 3 years in a row.
3 years in a row. It's the first time in NBA history the same two teams played each other 3 years consecutively in the finals. And so we've overlooked the fact that just a few years ago, without another All-Star playing more than half the season, James Harden led the Rockets to the 2 seed and 56 wins in the Western Conference Finals. That the Rockets had, of every team in the league, I believe, the biggest offseason acquisition. As far as, you can say the Celtics, if the Celtics had to give up a player in Isaiah Thomas. Rockets got Chris Paul. I know it was a trade, but they didn't have to trade another superstar. And the Rockets are quietly right about the best offense in the history of the NBA. I want to say that again. Prior to last night's game dinged them a couple tenths of a point. Going into last night's game, according to Basketball Reference, they had the single best offense in the history of the league. Now, another team on that list for best offenses in the history of the league is this year's Warriors and last year's Warriors. And so we're always going to focus on the Warriors. But the Rockets right now have elite point guard play for 48 minutes a night and 2 of the best 8 players in the league on one team. Only the Warriors can say that as well. 2 of the best 8 players. So, yeah, the Rockets are legitimate contenders, and we don't talk about them because they're in Houston and because Harden has had some bad playoff moments, as had CP3. I think that's why people don't want to take them seriously yet, CC.
And who's their coach?
Mike D'Antoni.
Mike D'Antoni. They don't take because Chris Paul hadn't been successful in the postseason. Harden hadn't been successful in the postseason. And the head coach, his system hasn't been successful in the postseason. So we've looked for teams to emerge in the West, but we thought, oh, it'd be San Antonio. We thought potentially Minnesota. They got a good young team. They added Jimmy Butler. We've been on the Clippers for the last couple years that they might emerge and be one of the top teams in the West. So that's the reasons why we haven't talked about Houston. Houston is having the most special season, so the attention would be warranted. What makes them so different? Their offense, with their coach. Their coach has always been a great offensive mind. Their offense is even more efficient than it's ever been. So that's the reason why they're starting to get the notoriety. But to me, the big difference is when they're not shooting the ball, when they're not scoring the ball, what are they doing? Well, they've added a couple players, and that being Chris Paul and P.J. Tucker. And in doing that, when they have laws offensively, they're better defensively now. So now they have the best offense in the history of the NBA. But when you have these laws, we've seen with Golden State. Golden State is better defensively, even though they get all the credit for their offense. Houston is doing the same thing. They are better defensively, especially in those critical moments. And when their offense is having a lull or they are sputtering, their defense picks them up. And that's what's led them to having the best record in the NBA.
This show started coming together over the summer when all these different trades and things were happening and there were eye-opening moves, and we started focusing on all the really big names, the Carmelo Anthony, the Kyrie Irving, the Isaiah Thomas going here, all the moving and shaking. And I think that we quietly, even though we knew that Chris Paul was going to Houston, like it was just a thing. I don't know if anyone really thought Chris Paul and James Harden were going to gel that well together. But there were all these other storylines that coming into this season we were so focused on. We got to know Lonzo, what's happening with Boston, what's happening with Cleveland. And quietly, without much pressure, Mike D'Antoni has been able to coach a team with two stars together, one who's played really well by himself, the way Russell Westbrook, but when you added players to Russell Westbrook's mode, it didn't work as well. But now you bring Chris Paul in, all of a sudden, he's been able to coach two players very successfully, and this team's playing very well.
And I give D'Antoni credit for that, but I also give Chris Paul and James Harden credit for it. Because, Chris, we talked off the air over the summer when this happened that I was like, listen, I'm a huge James Harden guy. I'm a huge Chris Paul guy. I didn't think the pairing, I thought the one team Chris Paul wouldn't be hugely additive to would be the Houston Rockets, because James Harden does so many of the same things. They instantly gelled. And one thing you mentioned about D'Antoni and his playoff success, it is true when you go through the history books, like look at the team's regular season, what they did in the postseason, and I know you know this, but for people out there that crush D'Antoni, I think it's a little unfair. 1 year that they absolutely could have won the title. In the playoffs, Joe Johnson breaks his face, and that derails them. Another year, they absolutely could win the title. Robert Horry hip checks Steve Nash. Amari Stoudemire then gets suspended for the critical game of that series. Those 7 seconds or less Suns teams, they did not win a title because of bad coaching, at least not in my estimation. They had some bad luck, and they ran up against some really, really good teams. So I think D'Antoni's gotten an unfair rap in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is a good offensive coach, but when you look at it, what are holes in his coaching theory? On the defensive end, he hadn't had a huge emphasis on defense. And when you get to the playoffs, you can't go up and down, up and down, up and down. Now they're relying on the three-pointer, which is different because that's the way the NBA has changed. When you get to the playoff, you got to get stops. You got to be able to stop people and turn people over. And that's that overall mentality. They've added that through free agency, which I believe makes them a special team.
Very good point. All right, coming up, a hilarious message from Lithuania to LaMelo and LiAngelo Ball.